Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. For a regular council meeting from March 16th, 2021, 7 p.m. Public input is a maximum of 30. Sorry, I got something in front of my screen here. The purpose of permitting people in the gallery to provide input should not be longer than 30 minutes unless approved by majority vote of council. Each speaker may provide a respectful comment to any topic they deem appropriate and not necessarily on the topic of the agenda of the meeting. The public input opportunity is meant for input and questions and answers. Each speaker may not speak for longer than 2 minutes, but may have a second opportunity if time permits. Each speaker must not be allowed to speak regarding a bylaw in respect to a public hearing has been held. For the record, please state your name. So we need a resolution to remove that, please. Moving on, so I need a motion.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. The introduction of late item, we're going to move that into new business at the end. Is that not correct, CAO?
We need a motion to accept it.
So we're going to take the introduction of late item on the Newcastle Dam. We're going to move it to number 14, new business. So do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay, so let's go right into our in-camera. We've decided to move the in-camera a little closer so we can have Dave speak because we have another delegate presentation coming up. So we're moving the in-camera number 16, that in accordance with section 92 of the community charter, this council meeting will be closed to the public. At this time, the Board of Council may give consideration to a matter in accordance with section 90-1 sub I, the community charter, to discuss advice and subject to solicitor-client privilege. So we resume regular council meeting. Go to the approval of the agenda, number 4. That the agenda for the regular council meeting for March 16th, 2021 be approved. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Minutes of previous meeting, recommended resolution is that the minutes from the regular council meeting on March 2nd, 2021 be adopted. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second. Second.
discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Number 6, petition and delegations. We have John Paul Fraser, Executive Director for the BC Salmon Farms Association, with Marcel France, Manager of Communications. JP and Michelle, are you online?
Yep, I'm here and I see John
Yes.
as well here.
We're here, your worship.
No, please, just.
Mr. Mayor.
Here,
But thanks, John.
worship.
Okay, John Paul, we're going to leave the floor to you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for having us. Really appreciate the invitation. Michelle and I are delighted to be here. We've got a presentation to deliver. It should take about 10 minutes. We'll try to race through it. And I got a little bit of audio visual stimulation as well, given the hour. It's always a good thing. And then hopefully we'll have some time to take some questions if that sounds good. Okay, let's go for it. So thank you, Michelle has the screen. So today I just wanted to talk to you, we wanted to talk to you about the Discovery Islands decision. You've undoubtedly read about it, heard about it in the media. We did an economic impact assessment report, released it a couple of weeks ago, and it's our pleasure to give you some of the highlights. We'll make sure that we leave in the chat function. I think Anne also has links to all of the material that I'll be summarizing in the next few minutes. Next slide. Okay, so just a quick update before we get into the actual report. You know, we are sitting on, our communities make up the #1 agricultural export commodity in British Columbia. Not many people know that. Not many people even in Northern Vancouver Island, where this all happens, know that, but it's significant. It's a $1.6 billion annual contributor to BC's economy. It's huge. We were and are the largest single donor of the BC Agricultural Alliance. I don't think many people know that either. So we're, you know, maybe we're modest, but we're also kind of a big deal. Our association represents over 70 members involved in various aspects of the industry. Just about all of our members are located, situated, employed, live, love here on the West Coast. Our industry supports over 6,500 families in British Columbia through direct, indirect, or induced deployment. Anyway, jobs that depend on the sector. We have just about every farm now, and certainly all the major companies are covered under multiple third-party stewardship council agreements, including the sort of the gold standard, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, which was founded by the World Wildlife Fund. We're proud to raise the single most carbon climate-friendly protein in the world here as well. So you just cannot find an animal protein that produces less carbon than BC ocean-raised salmon. We have multiple partnership agreements with Indigenous communities. About 80% of the salmon that ends up on people's doorsteps or dinner tables is via Indigenous partnership agreements. And the companies produce about 6 million meals on a weekly basis. So huge contributor to global food security. Next question, next slide, sorry. So we did a study just before, sort of late in the fall, where we could project a contribution that's even greater than the one we make if we could actually continue to grow. There are a lot of roadblocks in the way, primarily government incompetence, not at the local level. And we worked very hard on an economic impact opportunity report prior to the Discovery Islands decision, which forecast with sustainable growth about 10,000 new jobs that we could contribute over the next 30 years or so. And we did this because in the face of the pandemic and the economic recovery that's ahead of all of us, that we haven't even begun. We knew that BC was in for a long haul, and Vancouver Island as well, and we wanted to point out to government that if we get our stuff together and we get organized as governments and we improve our regulatory environment, we could actually see a significant increase in jobs on Vancouver Island and all the coastal communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. However, things have really changed dramatically for us, and that's what we're here to talk a bit about. Next slide. The decision was made on the 17th of December that is going to have and is already beginning to have serious impacts on our communities. And they're very real. And we wanted to take this time now to give you a sense of how it's beginning to impact some people and how worried they are, and what we need senior levels of government to see, hear, and feel. Michelle?
So this is where we'll just ask that the YouTube video be shown now.
my biggest thing is, what am I going to do if this shuts us down? I'm only a 3-year homeowner now. I have a child to worry about, so I think it's the closer we get, I think it'll finally start kicking in for me.
If they're closing down 30% of production without any consultation, well, where does that end? This is my home, and to have this uncertainty that it might all just disappear and be wiped away is very concerning.
Will I be able to support my family? What will I tell them? I've moved miles away from them so that I would be useful, and I'm worried that I might be useless.
We'll be out of work. The 2 boats will be out of work and our crew will be out of work. For the minister to make a decision like that, should have made sure all those bases are covered. Throwing the fish farms under the bus is not going to revive those rivers if we're having problems with other rivers where there is no fish farms.
It's very frustrating. I try to make a point and they tell me I'm lying or I'm bought by the industry or anything like that, because one, I put my ethics before money. I would never be in an industry where I thought they were doing harm to the environment. And 2, it's just not true.
Sometimes you can't even tell people that you work in this industry because they already imagine mean, gruff, monster people growing these fish. But we're people.
Take it off mute there. So that's those are a few folks that are going to be and have been negatively impacted by this decision, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about that right now. We're looking at about a quarter of the salmon aquaculture sector being wiped out. It's 15 months from today that those farms need to be out. But the activities that have already that need to happen to get there are already underway. We expect over 1,500 jobs to be eliminated potentially. This isn't 100%, but this is based on a lot of the information that we've been able to pull. These are well-paying jobs in the community. We're looking at significant economic output that's going to be lost, significant GDP locally. You're looking at about well over 250 local suppliers, goods and services that will be directly impacted. I think that's an important point. This isn't a decision that's going to impact multinational corporations as much as it is local, small, medium-sized businesses. We're looking at well over $20 million of potential lost spending on those suppliers. And at this point, well over 10 million salmon will have to be euthanized. The decision, in effect, was made in such a way that would not allow for a significant amount of salmon to complete their life cycle in the Discovery Island farms. The minister cut the transfer from fish that are at various stages of their development in the hatcheries. And there are no other farms that they can be relocated into. And the government knew that, but pressed ahead anyway. Next slide, sorry. Layoffs have begun. You may have seen a bit of it in the media, and they will continue as the companies begin to really contemplate and manage these closures. There is a freeze on planned investment. It's important to note that there is no new capital expenditures other than care and maintenance happening right now in the industry through our producer companies, and that's really the engine of activity for suppliers and into the economy. That's new nets, new contracts, new technology, new stuff. It's not getting built. We're looking at termination of contract and benefit agreements, many of which will actually no longer go to Indigenous communities because those revenues will no longer be there. And as I mentioned before, you're looking at mass euthanization. I didn't think I said this before, but we're looking at over 220 million meals that will no longer be enjoyed. So instead of the food being eaten, it's going to be wasted. Next slide. This just gives you an indication. It's not particularly clear, but it's an important slide, and we've got it up on our site so that people can dive more into it. But it's a very effective diagram of really how the job impact sort of radiates out from the direct farm-based at processor, at our hatcheries, and how it sort of radiates out into the supplier sectors, transportation, professional services, and then beyond into the broader community, restaurants, car dealerships, where money will not be spent, where activity will cease. And it shows you how really the industry is extremely interconnected. And this runs really from Campbell River all the way up to Port Hardy in your area. Next slide. Now we're not, and we're careful not to be advocating publicly for a reversal of the decision. It's a very difficult one. We weren't consulted. We weren't part of the process. We could have given government a lot of information, like we just showed you, as to what kind of impact their decision will have in the ramifications of that decision, but we weren't given that opportunity. And here we are. So what we're saying is, well, okay, if you made a decision based on consultation with local Indigenous communities, and there's lots of evidence to suggest that it was extremely poorly executed with those nations, and some of them have spoken publicly, including a former chief. You know, I think what you ought to be thinking about is doing this decision in a manner that provides a much more opportunity and time to find a workable solution, particularly for the people that are going to be impacted most directly. First thing though is, the next thing to do is to make sure that the salmon that are in the hatcheries can complete their life cycle. It's sort of akin to kind of closing down it's not a really great example, but it's kind of akin to closing down an auto assembly plant and deciding that all of the vehicles that are sort of half assembled will just sort of die, as opposed to being completed and then sent out, sold, and then close. You know, an orderly closure where you minimize the impact on people and you complete the cycle and you do it in a manner that is planned. That would be good. And let's get everyone to get together, because one of the things we learned about in the Broughton process, and I can talk a bit about that if folks aren't too familiar. We've done this before. We did it over the last couple of years up in the Broughton with some of the sites where the governments, the local nations and the provincial government struck an agreement to review and perhaps remove some of the sites. You know, we've been at that process now for 3 years. We've been working very closely with the nations and with government to scale down, and in some cases sustain some of the activity. That's 3 years, and that's a 5-year process. We've been given half that time, 18 months, to manage more production. It makes no sense. And the table that we have with the nations and with the government has been really incredible. It's won multiple awards, and it's produced protocols that we've actually used elsewhere in the sector in terms of monitoring, inspection, and confidence building with the nations where we operate. And it really has brought people together elsewhere. So in effect, we're asking the government, the federal government, to take a strategic take a page out of the provincial government strategy and look at the farms in that area through this kind of lens. That's all we're asking for. And we've asked, when we talk to folks like you, you know, we're asking for that message to be echoed, because it's a responsible approach. It's possible that government could have made a decision like it did in the Broughton, decide that the farms need to be closed, but then let's sit down and figure out how best and when best to do it to minimize impact on people, on communities, and also on the animals themselves. None of that happened here. So we're scrambling, folks. We're 3 months into this decision. We got 15 months left. And what you're going to experience and witness over the weeks and months to come is increased unemployment and potentially a much bigger, deeper, more permanent reduction in economic activity in Northern Vancouver Island. And I think that's the end of it. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, John Paul. For the council, we're going to allow 2 questions max per council, please. Anybody have a first question?
Yeah, I'll have a question.
Councillor Craig?
All right, John Paul, thank you very much for all that. I have one question. Actually, I have a couple questions, but this one is regarding the 3 separate lawsuits that Mowi, Cermak, and Grieg Seafood have on the go. Now, it's my understanding that Mowi, Cermak, and Grieg have 3 individual lawsuits, so they're not all coming together and doing one lawsuit, because one lawsuit can be quashed, whereas 3 separate ones have 3 different chances of succeeding. Are you getting updated by the legal team as to how those lawsuits are proceeding?
No.
Good enough.
Right, you're right. The companies did file separate judicial reviews. Mowi has since filed an injunction with the federal court. I gather there's to be a court hearing soon. There's no date been set. That decision would be immediate. Typically, injunctions seek immediate reprieve, and that's really about completing the transfer of those salmon to avoid significant loss. Already 1 million have been euthanized.
All right. And
Thank you.
my second question on that, and it's going to seem like it's a silly question, but I assure you, sir, it is really not. So,
Okay. Go for it.
Just going to go careful on this one.
Okay.
Are there any that you know of? Are there any pending applications by any group for a fish farm in the Discovery Passage once the existing ones get removed?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean that there isn't. I'm just not aware of any.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other council member have a question for John Paul?
I kind of would like to get your idea, John Paul, on, is there any indication of them rethinking this? Because it is an asinine bloody thing.
Thank you for the question and the characterization of their decision. No, I will say that we're well to 3 months into this decision. Not a text, an email, a letter. No packages arrived at my door. Nothing. The provincial government issued a letter weeks ago indicating that they were putting together a sort of a key team of key folks to help assess and understand the impacts, so governments could work together on the kinds of worker impact supports and business impact supports that might be needed. That was 4 weeks ago from Minister Ravi Kahlon, Economic Recovery Minister. Nothing. The provincial government has not heard even a response to a provincial cabinet minister from the federal government, from the federal counterpart. Folks that I've talked to have rarely, if ever, seen this kind of behavior from the federal government. It's clear that the decision was not very likely the one that was recommended to the minister by her officials after having gone through the process. And I don't know that the public service in Victoria can't even engage with the public service in Ottawa, because I don't know that they know what to do next. There's this inertia, there's this hide and hope kind of approach, which doesn't usually end in success. It's clear that this decision is entirely politically motivated for the purpose of placating environmental activist agitation and agitators. Fair enough. I'm an environmentalist. I'm an environmental activist in some cases in my past, but I don't, in government, you typically don't make decisions based on fear because you want people to stop hating you. There's an election likely coming up federally. That's what's motivated this action. And this government does not care about the northern communities of Vancouver Island. They have no political prospects. They have really nothing to lose by ultimately eliminating these jobs, and quite frankly, kicking industry that's down, which they feel is a popular maneuver in urban Vancouver. So we are being victimized, as other rural coastal communities have, by the political interests in much larger electorally significant sectors. In effect, for the record, your worship and councillors, we're getting hosed.
So, John Paul, there's still been no word from Minister Jordan, no plan in place, nothing for the workers, nothing for the fish that are going to have to be called.
Nothing.
Okay.
So, you know, unfortunately, that's become one of our key default messages, that here we are sitting on a decision that's beginning to have real psychological impact. People are worried about their homes. They don't know whether they should leave. They don't know who to turn to. They don't understand why the decision was made when every scientific report since the Cohen Commission that's been produced for this in this area would indicate that we can operate safely with less than minimal risk to migrating sockeye for the commercial industry to catch, by the way. Why this is happening, the minister has admitted it wasn't a science-based decision, that it was about social license, but you have Chief Brian Asue, former chief of the Webekai, say that he only had 15 minutes with the minister. Sorry, he had half an hour with the minister. 15 minutes was her talking about the decision that she made that he didn't really even support, and his nation felt completely railroaded in that process. But again, we're not asking for the decision to ultimately be reversed. We would just like it to be done and executed in an orderly manner. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for John Paul? No. Councillor Paulson, you're muted.
I just want to thank you for all the information that you provided for us tonight. I'd also like to mention that it's not only the all the companies involved in these closures, it's also the people of the North Island, because the different companies have had a huge impact on our communities with what they donate to us every year, and it's not just a few dollars. It's thousands and thousands of dollars for the school, for the health clinic, for nonprofit organizations, and donations like to a Secret Santa that we have here. And last summer, in the middle of COVID, both Greg and Moe donated a huge amount of canned salmon and fresh salmon, and also salmon lunches that they delivered throughout the community. So it impacts all of us, and as well as the workers and the businesses. So it goes far beyond what what you're saying in how it's impacting the villages. I just wanted to bring that up because it will be hurting the groups that try to do things in the community for their citizens. So I want to thank you for the good work that you have done, and I just find all the advertising from the activists, it's so hard to take when they don't hear they don't want to hear the scientific part of it. So it's very frustrating. I can imagine how frustrated you are.
Well, thank you, Councillor Paulson, particularly for your comments around community contributions. That's a huge. That's what people care mostly about. Actually, it's being able to thrive and give back. And unfortunately, this is going to limit future contributions as much as I think the companies won't want that to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're still sifting through it. I think just to add one more point, we don't really know where this is going to end. I mean, some of the larger producer companies, which really drive a lot of the activity, they're not necessarily the primary employers, but they drive all the employment. You know, there's some tough decisions that have to get made about whether this is a place to stay. Not because they don't want to, but because, you know, the people need to conduct their business in a manner that provides the kind of revenue that can support the people who are there. And if there's no certainty, and when you operate in an environment like ours, where the landlord is government, without that certainty and without trust in process, which has been shattered, you have to wonder how much more money and how much more investment can we actually get and expect to get to continue and to grow the operations. And right now, the certainty for our sector to grow is non-existent. And I fear that without a change in approach and perhaps a change in government, that uncertainty will lead to what our economist calls exogenous shock, and which means that you go over a critical mass tipping point. And what we're talking about here in terms of lost, even if it's a quarter lost of production, that can quite easily slide into an overall general decline that we can't recover from. There is no land-based aquaculture unicorn. That does not exist for these communities. If it did exist, it exists in Las Vegas, in large land areas that have almost no environmental oversight near an airport. The reason why we operate in the communities is because of the ocean, not in spite of it. So these solutions about closed containment on land are really meant to be to make the opponents sound as if they have it all figured out. Really, what it is, it's a clever Trojan horse way to ultimately have us leave, and they're winning. They're winning. They're succeeding, and we just got to keep fighting.
So JP, land-based is not an option, is that not correct?
It is. Well, first of all, it's not been done on a mass scale and certainly can't be replicated. We do 87 metric tons annually. So if you were to try to replicate that on land, it's probably the size of a couple of Stanley Parks. So good luck finding the land, good luck finding the power, and good luck using all the chemicals that you would need to use in order to keep those tanks clean. And by the way, the fish in a tank are much more compressed than they are out in a free range ocean, natural, clean energy environment. It's a totally different animal, in effect, that comes out at the end, and it's far more expensive to produce, and the costs can't meet a market right now. One of our members had to recently close his facility, which is a small scale facility in Agassiz, where he grows Pacific coho. There's no market for it. Plus, it tastes like shit. And so people don't want to eat that kind of salmon. They would rather have salmon grown and raised in the natural waters of British Columbia. There's a market for it, and the numbers bear that out. So it's it's just a way for people who oppose aquaculture to make themselves sound like the solution oriented, but there is no future for land-based. There is certainly land-based aquaculture options and opportunities at small scale levels, both in terms of full grow out to market size, but also what we call hybrid, where we can actually grow the fish to much larger sizes before they ultimately spend the last frame or phase of their life in the ocean environment to be raised. That's an option too. Those are massively expensive proposals too, with huge new hatcheries that have to get constructed. But you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to transition the industry, and that's not impossible. But no one's spending $100 in that kind of technology today with the environment we currently have.
Okay, John, Paul, and Michelle, I want to thank you both very much for coming tonight. I know it's late.
Well, we really appreciate the invite, and we're sorry we probably went on, and we definitely appreciate the support. And if you want to lend some correspondence to the effort, we'll get Anne the information on and the portal that we've developed for that. And of course, you guys can always make your voice heard on your own to provincial and federal levels of government. We very much appreciate it.
Okay, well, thanks very much again. You take care.
You take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John Paul.
Bye.
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 We'll just wait for confirmation. Are we clear, Administrator? We're good?
Clear to go, Mayor
Thank
Baker.
you. Petition, recommended resolution that the delegation of the BC Salmon Farm be received. Do I have a motion, please?
I move.
Second? Discussion? Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carried. Correspondence from A and B. From A to B to be received. Need a motion, please? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Council report? None?
Oh, can I?
Sorry, Councillor Paulson?
Yes, I need to clarify something. Is this where I give my reports from the CSWM, or is it under reports of committees?
CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I would suggest that council reports be under number 8. If you're going to give a verbal report, that would be the time to do it. And if you had a written report, we would have had it attached to the agenda and circulated it, and it would be reviewed now as well.
Okay, I have a verbal report, and it's typed up as a written report. And the problem that I'm having is that the meetings always come 2 days after the our regular council meetings. So, and I do have a hospital meeting on Thursday, but for this report, I'd like to talk about the waste management meeting in March. They had a chipper project that was funded by the Community Resilience Investment Program in Fanny Bay, Hornby Island, Denman Island, Oyster River, and Comox First Nations. So it was carried out in the densest areas of those locales and overseen by the fire departments in the areas. So the object was to remove fire fuel to reduce the risk of fire hazards. And while this program was running, they removed 65 to 70 tons of wood chips from people's properties. So, but what happened was, part of the agreement was that the chips had to be moved off-site. They couldn't be chipped and left for the people to use. So the directors in those areas have asked for more information and solutions on how they could get access and use the wood chips locally, especially in the rural areas where people have big gardens or and want to use them there. Instead of spending money to get them off site, why not give them away free to the people that are there? But it's one of a project that they hope will continue, and next year it's going to be operating, or this year, sorry, it'll be operating in the Comox Valley and on Mount Washington. So it would be really exciting if we could get something like that here, because there's so much fire fuel that's down on people's properties. So, and then they had a report on the cost of illegal dumping over the last 2017 since it started, and it has been dropping regularly since it started. And being new to this, I didn't know what Sayward was able to access. So I did ask for further information on the illegal dumping process that they have for this waste management to come in and clear it away and try and find out who it is. But I did see that last year they had only 5 illegal dumps that were discovered in Sayward, but I'm not sure whether that's Sayward Valley or Sayward Village, or anyways. I'm waiting to get more information from the CAO, Russ Dyson, in the next couple of weeks. So they have some signage that they showed, and suggested that if there is a lot of illegal dumping, that the signage can be posted in the areas where it happens most often. So something that really concerns me about around Sayward is like all the garbage and dumping that you can see right from the road. And I'd like to get some more clarification on what we can do about it to promote people to recycle and use the weekly garbage to get rid of their trash. It was very interesting. So that's my report from the CSWM. And I also wanted to talk about attending a forum put on by Comox First Nations, which was very informative, and the speakers were excellent. And I think it was talking about, it was all about treaty negotiations, and I think I would like to suggest that we look at starting beginning the meetings again with First Nations, because there were some very interesting points that came out of this forum, and I think it would behoove us to rekindle our meetings with Comox First Nations. So I don't know if I need to put in a motion or what, but I can talk to the CAO about this later.
Good. Thank you. CAO, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes, good, thanks. So I just, a couple of things through the mayor to Councillor Polson and to the rest of council. You might recall that we did come forward a few council meetings ago with a proposal to seek grant funding to actually carry out the same chipping program here in the valley. So there is going to be a chipping program in the village. The valley was not a participant in the program, but they're going to be making chipping services available. So hopefully we'll be able to tackle some of the real hot spots through that program. We've actually got funding, and we're getting ready to enter a contract with with the person who submitted a name to actually carry out the services. So that should happen quickly. And then on to this, the second point about the C2C forums, you'll recall that we had some money in the budget for that, and that is something that's available to happen. I think generally what happens is that there's an exchange back and forth, one party hosts and then the other party hosts. So we've started those discussions with the band administrator, Jenny Miller, and I think they're very interested in the projects that the village has underway with the community plan and the hazard mapping on the Salmon River. And so there's probably a good opportunity through the engagement processes in those two initiatives to follow up with the C2C, which could kind of roll some of the implementation together through some of those joint those exercises that they have some joint mutual interest in. And I guess the other thing is we were sort of waiting to see if the COVID public health orders could be lifted to enable real meetings sometime in the fall, and then proceed with the planning for the meeting at that point. So that's sort of update to the points on Councillor Polson's comment.
Okay, thank you. Reports of committees. Number 9. Councillor Kushner, do you have a report? Sorry.
No, I do not. No, I do not.
Councillor Craig?
I do not.
Councillor Tinsley?
No, I do not.
Mayor report. Councillor Polson mentioned what we had the other day, and I agree fully with her. It was an excellent presentation that they did on the First Nations. And we're going to be pursuing, of course, that relationship and getting more information on what they have for what they're talking about, this new treaty coming up that they're in negotiations with right now, which I believe is 12,000 acres between here and Campbell River as well. Sorry, CAO, you have your hand up?
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Nope.
Nope. Okay. Unfinished business? Staff reports. Solid Waste Service Additional Receptacle Program. That council received the Solid Waste Service Additional Receptacle Program report for information and discussion. That council directs staff to amend the fees and charges bylaw to reflect the new change for $5 for a sticker that enables citizens to dispose of additional solid waste. CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is a practice that the village had in place many years past, but it hasn't been actually offered for several years. It's really a supply approach to a problem. And you mentioned the illegal dumping. What we're hoping to do is to remove the barriers to people considering illegal dumping as their option by providing the sticker to enable them to put an extra bin out so that they can get their waste picked up. So it's just a soft approach to a problem as an initial effort to try and reduce the dumping by providing an option for people to put out more garbage than is normally possible for the fee of $5. And again, it's been something that the village has done in the past, but not utilized for a number of years. So it's a common initiative in the spring everywhere as a way of people doing a bit of a spring cleanup. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So recommended resolution. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll move that.
Second? Second?
I'll second it.
Discussion?
I have some discussion.
Councillor Polson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question is, it says illegal dumping in the Sayward area has been a concern, and in 2019, 2 large dumps sites were discovered. So I'm wondering if those related to the village or to the valley?
Thank you. Through Mayor Baker to Councillor Polson, I think I'd like to bring in the CFO who's done the good hearted work on this project and have her answer the question.
Thank you to Mayor and Council. Those two large dump sites were out in the valley, and when I say large dump sites, I know Councillor Polson, you referred to several dump sites in 2025, I think you mentioned. So these particular ones in my report are substantial, so really large dump sites. But yes, those two that were in 2019 were out in the valley.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And at the CSWM meeting last week, the presentation that person gave on the illegal dumping, it was over the course of the 4 years since it had been running, and they had really found that it had each year it was declining in numbers of illegal dumps, but I didn't know how a person goes about reporting an illegal dump and how they have to transport it to Campbell River, and they say it's done by a volunteer group and staff, but over 50% of the stuff that's dumped at an illegal dump site, it's stuff that could be in a free store or given away for free, or disposed of in recycling. So I wonder if we need to include, as part of goodwill in this, is sending people out information that I think we really do recycle quite well in Sayward, but if we ask them to recycle as much as they can, so less is going to the landfill. And I know our collection fees went up this year for the garbage collecting, so people now can have 2 receptacles, but the price has gone up, and I'm just wondering if raising the fee to $5 per additional tag would lead to more dumping or not, but it seems like the stuff that's being illegally dumped is not just household garbage. It's big pieces of furniture and appliances and electronics and things like that wouldn't fit in a garbage bag anyway for recycling, or for scheduled waste collection.
CAO.
Well, I would hope there'd be some discussion from the rest of council too, whether they see the $5 fee for extra tags as possibly making people consider illegal dumping more rather than getting a tag.
I personally agree with Councillor Polson. I don't think offering a $5 for an extra garbage bin is going to be any deterrent for it. I mean, that would be nice, but as Councillor Polson pointed out, those items that are generally being illegally dumped is not household waste. I'm not sure if $5 is an appropriate amount or whether that's too high. We'll hear from the rest of council on that. Somebody has their hand up. I can't see who.
Be Wes.
Oh, okay. Councillor Craig.
I would take the opposite approach on this one. I don't actually mind the $5 fee. It's done in the Lower Mainland all over the place, but you know, in this community, I don't think a single person will use it. We do have three Sayward cleanup days, and yes, most people have all their garbage well within under the 2 receptacle amount. I personally don't see one single person in this entire village using one of these stickers over the next year. I mean, you might get 1 or 2, but I really don't feel that this is going to be anything that's going to be used in any kind of demonstrable quantity. So for me, it's a moot point either or, because I just don't see it being used, period. I really don't. And that's my 2 cents there.
Thank you. Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm going to suggest that the figure, I believe, is a result of the previous figure being at $2. So the length of time since then, approximately 8 years, is reasonable relative to the charge. And I do believe that the charge is just to reflect our recoup of the additional costs that the village will incur for an extra can beyond the current structure. While I would agree with some of the statements made around the other services available, I think as the population does get older, and we are all trying to encourage this type of responsible action, I think making this service available, which is really a minimal cost, just having the stickers available and maybe something in the newsletter, is another tool in the toolkit to encourage people to be responsible with both their recycling and garbage use. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Craig, you have your hand up again. Sorry, Councillor Craig, you have your hand up again? No? Okay. CAO?
No, I don't.
Any comments?
Nope. I think it's really council's call on this one.
Right. I don't believe it's going to stop any illegal dumping, but I do believe that considering the charges that we have and that everything has gone up, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask and have that option for people to have the $5 charge. But it has nothing, I don't believe, anything to do with the illegal dumping. But I do support the $5 sticker because costs have increased dramatically. So hopefully somebody will come along and pay that money. So let's bring it to council for a vote. We've got the recommended resolution that the additional receptacle program report for information and discussion, and that council directs staff to amend the fees charges bylaw to reflect the new charge of $5 a sticker that enables citizens to dispose of additional solid waste. Do you have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Add? Opposed? Hearing none, carried. Staff report, proposed revisions on bylaw 416, 2015 council procedure bylaw, bylaw 471 on page 14. CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is the return of the bylaw that we talked about last week, or 2 weeks ago, rather. There was a bit of information introduced by Councillor Craig during that time, and since then, Councillor Craig and I have sat down and gone through his suggested additions, of which some are included in this this proposal that you've got before you. So maybe the best thing would be for me to go through again, just highlight the proposed changes in the procedures bylaw, and I'll outline the ones that are new that we didn't talk about from last week. Primarily, there's a change to clarify the start time. It's now shown in bylaw 416 as commencing at 2:30 in the afternoon, whereas there was an amendment a while ago to change it to 7 p.m. So this is the formal amendment to the bylaw in here to note that the current practice is that council meetings are at 7 p.m. It allows for the members to appear as delegates. That's already in the bylaw right now. I just want to highlight that given the COVID restrictions, the bylaw does provide for any citizen to appear before council as a delegate. And so that has remained unchanged. There's a new section added under section 8.4, which provides for electronic meetings as approved by council at the onset of the meeting to provide for any future emergency situations with a requirement for council to support the need. Currently, of course, we're operating under the COVID Measures Act, which is a provincial piece of legislation allowing councils to do this, whereas the procedures bylaw generally don't allow that. So this line in the proposed amendments allows for this to happen again in the event that there's something else like a flood, a fire, or some reason why council can't meet. There's an amendment to section 16.1 to remove the public input, which is now cited as being at the beginning of the agenda, and to provide for it at the end of the meeting. And there's another section 16(1)A, which allows for a call to order. This was one of the suggestions from Councillor Craig in his good work from last week. There's also section 16(1)O, which is to add notices of motions, and this allows for councillors to, it's not that they weren't allowed before, but this formalizes the provision for councillors to table new motions. Again, that was part of the package that Councillor Craig researched a couple of weeks ago at the March 2nd meeting. The most significant proposed changes include sections 20, subsection 1 to 7, which relate to correspondence, and those basically provide for what correspondence will be placed on council's agenda. Again, council sees all correspondence. It's just what becomes part of the formal agenda. Some of the letters that would be related to labor relations or that would appear to be defamatory or that relate to something that council has dealt with within the past 12 months would not be placed on the agenda according to the new provisions. There's also a section 19(6), which clarifies that council's role is to listen and ask questions of delegates. Again, this is a similar clause to section 20, which really is intended to clarify that council is making the decisions on behalf of citizens. Citizens, for their part, are entitled to understand what the decisions are, why they were made, and to clarify some of the questions, but not to participate in the debate over the decisions. It's intended that they be provided the opportunity to participate by listening, but not participate by engaging in the debate. Again, this whole intent of the procedures bylaw is to recognize the primary responsibility of local governments to operate their services in a open, accountable, respectful, and accessible manner. And again, are required under the Act to have a procedures bylaw that outlines how council will conduct its business. And so these are the proposed revisions to bylaw 416, which is the procedures bylaw of council. Are there any questions? Sorry, Mayor Baker, I think you're muted.
And you are correct, I was muted. Thank you. Recommended resolution that council receive the proposed revisions for bylaw 416 for 2015 council procedure bylaw report for information and discussion. That staff post notice and prepare revisions for the village website, that the Campbell River Mirror notice boards and the Sayward News for April 2021 edition. And finally, that staff return April 6, 2021 council meeting with a summary of public comments received and proposed revisions, and request that council consider fourth reading and final adoption of the bylaw. Do I hear a motion, please? Second? Can I have a second, please? I need a second. Sorry, council, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, so I need a second. We have a hand up.
I'm not seconding. I have a question.
Okay, wouldn't that be part of the discussion, Councillor Craig?
It would, but it does not appear that you're having a second at the moment. So without a second, your motion cannot go forward. But that's not the question that I have. So
Okay,
I'll
what's
wait.
your question, Councillor Craig?
On page 6 of the minutes, if you all flip back to your agendas on page 6, if you look at motion R21, which was moved and seconded and carried, it said specifically in regards to this motion that staff return to the April the 20th, 2021 regular council meeting with revisions to council procedure bylaw 471 tabled by Councillor Craig for council's review and consideration. It was my understanding that that motion meant that this particular bylaw that we're discussing would come back on April the 20th. But it's here right now for first, second, and third reading, which seems to me, I could be mistaken, but it seems to me that this being on this agenda right now in this format is contravening the motion that we made at the last meeting, and therefore is out of order.
CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Well, I guess, you know, the original intent was to bring it back. But because we were able to you and I were, Councillor Craig, you know that you and I sat down, went through the proposals, agreed on how we would go forward, I thought. So I didn't see the point in waiting until April 20th. Initially, I thought there'd be a fair bit of work to do to incorporate the suggested revisions that you tabled on the 2nd. However, in discussions with you, you know, it sounded to me like you were willing to sort of go with a smaller version now and hold this back in case we needed to bring in heavier responses to a bigger problem. In other words, some of the proposed recommendations that were tabled on the 2nd included penalties and suspensions and that sort of heavier artillery, which I thought what we had agreed on was that we would use that if we need it, but not start with that, not lead with that. In fact, if we find the procedures bylaw is insufficient with the proposed revisions, then we might need to include more suspensions and penalties and that sort of thing, but it just seemed a bit sort of heavy for a procedures bylaw without a real stated problem to justify having that kind of level of sort of retaliation, I guess. And I thought that's why initially we were going with the 20th, was to provide for a bit more time for that, but that was my recollection of our meeting. And that's why it's before you tonight, because the project seemed to slim down a bit once we met.
So Councillor Craig, the question is, do you not agree with what's written in the bylaw?
No, the question is that there was a moved and seconded motion to bring it back on April the 20th. Now, while I appreciate having the meeting with the CEO, it was a very good meeting. I am a man of procedure, and this is a motion that was seconded and carried, and I'd like to follow the rules of law on this. And I'd like to bring it back on April the 20th, as council had directed.
Okay, is there any reason why it couldn't be brought back now?
Because we had a motion that was seconded. It's procedure. It goes to procedure, how it's the correct procedure, and this is the correct procedure to follow. That's just how it goes. That's procedure.
Okay, so somebody else has their hand up. I can't see who. CAO?
Oh, sorry, Mayor Baker, I didn't mean to have my hand up. I'm trying to get rid of it, so.
I've got somebody else with their hand up. The CFO, do you have your hand up?
Sorry, it was me. It was me,
Oh,
Councillor
Councillor
Tinsley.
There you go.
Respecting Councillor Craig's procedural conformity, it would seem that reasonable to me that this is a proposed revision, and in the interest of moving something forward and activity, that if all are in agreement of moving this proposed revision forward for public input, that would be the most reasonable action, regardless of formal procedure. That's my input.
Okay. Also, what I'm not clear on is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Craig, but when did you receive the agenda for tonight's meeting? Did you get it today, or was it earlier last week or later last week?
I received it yesterday.
Yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you didn't have the opportunity to clarify this with the CAO prior to tonight's meeting?
The meeting minutes are set, Mayor Baker. They're set, which means they cannot be changed or clarified or adjusted, as Councillor Tinsley says. They are procedurally set. Now, as far as the CAOs in my discussion goes, yes, we agreed on certain things, but no, we did not agree on other things. Now, the reason that there was an April 20th deadline is because this council needed an opportunity to debate and discuss all the revisions, not just the ones that were recommended here.
Okay,
And
and
the
when
fact
do you,
that
when are we
because
going to be
these
doing that
meeting
debate,
minutes are
Councillor Craig?
set,
Sorry,
it is out
Councillor.
of order.
Sorry, Councillor Craig, when do you suggest that we do that debate? Because I don't have a list in front of me on exactly what your part of that conversation. So what would be an adequate time or place to debate that?
The reason why you don't have a list is exactly the reason why it should not be on the agenda today, because everything should have been provided to each set of councilors so we could debate everything with everybody having the exact same information that was provided to the CAO. That's the reason for debate.
Then my recommendation obviously is that we move this to April 20th CAO. Do you have any further input?
No, thank you, Council Mayor Baker. That's probably what's best right now. And then I will, my recommendation was not to include a lot of the material, and which is why I didn't include it tonight. However, I can circulate that and we can bring it back on April the 20th.
Okay, and at that point, we'll debate what Councillor Craig has proposed.
Mayor Baker?
I'm sorry?
Mayor Baker, could I have a word? I read through that and so much of it is so heavy-handed, so I can see where the wanting to get it over with or came from, but I don't agree with it at all. So, but anyway, if it's the 20th, it'll be the 20th.
Okay, we'll have that discussion, but we can debate it on the 6th, can we not?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll bring it back. We'll have that discussion on the 6th, debate it then, and then we'll bring the motion forward on the 20th.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, do we need a resolution to move this? We need a motion? Okay, I need a motion in place that we move this item and do the debate on April 6th and do the motion for council on the 20th of April. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, does that also jump into our next one with, no, should be fine. Staff report from the Seward Valley Department, Fire Department, everybody got that? So recommended resolution that council receive the Seward Valley Fire Department monthly report for information and discussion. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Opposed? Carried. Revenue anticipation bylaw, number 470, 2021. CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is, of course, to give a fourth and final reading to the bylaw to provide for the borrowing of money in anticipation of revenue, which is the direction that council gives to staff to, if we need to access the line of credit to provide for staff cash shortages during the time that we have bills coming in, but before we get the taxes received.
Thank you. Recommended resolution that council, pardon me, that the revenue anticipation bylaw 470, 2021 be giving fourth and final reading. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. That the procedure amendment bylaw, that's going to be moved as well. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I need a motion to move that to the 6th and to the 20th. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Opposed? Carried. Okay, the 2021-2025 financial plan bylaw 472, 2021 CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is the opportunity for council to provide first and second and third reading of the financial plan that you've been reviewing for the last several meetings. And so this is the opportunity to take that last step.
Okay, so the recommended resolution is that the 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 472, 2021, be given first, second, and third reading. Do I have a motion?
So
Do I
moved.
have a motion? Sorry, motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
discussion? Opposed? Motion carried. Zoning amendment bylaw 473, 2021. CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is the bylaw that we talked about last March the 2nd, where staff were directed to come back with the amendment to correct what would appear to be a clerical error in the zoning bylaw, allowing for a single family dwelling in the high density zone. I'd just like to suggest a slight amendment. Should council support staff recommendation that this be given first and second reading tonight, in that we could council could waive the requirement for a public hearing, because under section 464 of the Local Government Act, where where a local government has an official community plan that affects the lands covered in the zoning bylaw, and where the proposed amendment aligns with the official community plan, a local government has the opportunity to waive the public hearing. So I'm recommending that we do that because for a number of reasons. First of all, this is aligned with the community plan and the provisions are there to waive it. Secondly, there's only 4 properties affected, so it's very easy to contact those property owners directly. And plus we have, of course, opportunity to announce the proposals and obligations to, and so there seems to be no reason to have a public hearing. So I'd like to recommend that council provide for first, second, and third reading, and that the council waive the requirement for a public hearing in accordance with section 464(2) of the Local Government Act.
Do I have a motion?
You've got one.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Did you want to talk about that during the discussion, Councillor
No.
Craig, of why you're opposed?
I like the public hearing process.
Okay. One opposed, motion carried. New business. The late item was for the Newcastle Dam decommissioning, CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. So you'll recall that we had visits from the auditor several weeks ago, who went through the accounts, and they'll of course be appearing at a meeting in next week, or the next council meeting, to present their report. But one of the things they asked for is that council review and pass a motion to identify the total costs of the dam decommissioning, and also in that resolution note the sources of funding, so that there's a clean record of what the costs were and where the sources of funding were. And so this staff report provides for the 4 funding sources that council was able to obtain funding for to cover the total cost of the project, which is $1,194,726, and then it provides those 4 various funding line items from our financial plan as to where the grant funding was stored and used to cover the costs of the dam decommissioning.
Thank you.
So no additional new costs here, just basically a reckoning of accounts so that the auditors are happy with the record that's kept.
Good.
Thank you. So staff recommendations that council receives the Newcastle Dam decommissioning, total cost of project and source funds reports, and the council approves the following funding sources for the total project cost of $194,726,000. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll move that.
Second,
Second.
Motion carried. Public question period. The purpose of the public question period is to permit people in the gallery to ask questions and issues discussed at council during the meeting. Speakers will be allowed to ask one question each if time permits. After everyone has an opportunity to ask a second, or they could ask a second question. Speakers will be allowed to ask a second question. There we go. For the record, they would state their name and address. And given that the meeting is held electronically, any questions would be submitted in writing to mayor and council in advance of adjournment. Is there any submission, CAO?
No, Mayor Baker, there were no submissions received for mayor and council's review tonight.
Thank you. So as was stated earlier, in camera was moved to the beginning. So now we're at recommended resolution for adjournment.
So moved.
I haven't finished yet. That's a regular council meeting. The council March 16th, 2021 be adjourned. What do you think, Norm?
I apologize.
Oh, good. Are you ready? to-
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Do I have discussion? No? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, everybody. You have a good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you. You as well.